So since we just need to speak loudly so that this can pick up the audio.
I'll give you a yeah. Nice to meet you. And you're the colors places on earth. My experience. Yeah, that's what I have on several occasions in the month. So
Hi, good afternoon. How is everybody doing? Thank you for moving to the front of the room. Anybody that comes in, please come towards the front. It's easier to be interactive if I can see your lovely faces. Don't be scared of your neighbors. You're going to get to know them really well. All the way up. Come on. Okay. Sit at a table with other people. They're going to be your good friends. So as people come in, just welcome them to the front of the room. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Laura Clemens. I'm going to be leading the session. We have one presenter physically in the room with us, in addition to myself, Prisca Weems, and we have another presenter that is connecting in from California. Dr. Acom is actually in the midst of presenting right now in California, and he's going to duck out and do the presentation of his tool as well. So I want to start off with a story about an art gallery that I used to run out in California. Hi. The art gallery had all kinds of different people that collected art, right? That would come in and buy artwork. They would come in, and some people would spend $3,000 on a piece of artwork, and it's their very first piece, and it was a really, really big deal for them to spend $3,000. We had other clients that would purchase $1 million worth of artwork and fill up a 13,000 square foot house, and this will be their 5th house that they've done. So we had a lot of different people buying art for a lot of different reasons, but they all had one thing in common. None of them considered themselves to be art collectors. They all just loved art. They liked to go in places, find something that they fell in love with, and take it home with them. But they were not a collector, because art collectors are other people. They're people that are much smarter. They know stuff about art. They probably know the value of artwork. They know a bunch of stuff about artists, and they're probably buying art for some sort of strategic reason. And there are all these reasons that they weren't art collectors. Even if they had a whole house full of artwork, they weren't art collectors, because those are other people. That's kind of the way that I feel about the term activist. So I think in the room we're all pretty comfortable with the term advocate. Who here feels like they're an advocate for something? Raise your hand. We got good advocates. Who here considers themselves an activist? Great. 1, 2, maybe 3 activists in the room. So I've always been comfortable with the term advocate. I've advocated for sustainable communities, I've advocated for bicycle lanes, I've advocated for education in the arts, I've advocated for sustainable buildings. I think that I became an activist, like the word activist was used towards me when I lived through this. So in Alabama, we were hit by 67 tornadoes in one day. That's a lot of tornadoes. I don't know if you've ever had the entire system that you depend on taken out from under you, all communications down, people don't know how to connect with one another. And I took this photograph. This is very typical for what happened all over the state of Alabama. So when every system that you have in place is gone, what do? You just start doing, right? People just come out and they try to figure out, like, what can I do? I want to help. This is terrible. Look, everyone's lost everything. My house was not damaged, so I was one of the people with the ability to start doing. And when I transformed my thinking into an activist, it means that it just freed me up to not worry about stepping on toes and what the system in place was and who's supposed to be doing what, because the Red Cross headquarters, it was in with this. The city halls and the town squares throughout the state, they all look like this. All of the people that we rely on to do stuff for us in government, they have their own things to worry about. So we had to start doing for ourselves. It was pretty freeing. So this is a donation supply drive that I organized, because it turns out you just start doing. I called some people. I knew a guy with a truck. I knew a guy that owned the shopping center where a Home Depot was. He said, sure, you can set up. So we just went and started doing. And it's a dangerous place to be a doer, right? So the police show up and they say, who gave you permission to be here? And I said, the guy that owns the property gave me permission. And they say, but who gave you permission to collect building supplies? No one. There is no one else to do it. We have to patch roofs. We have to fix windows. We need this done now. I'm doing it because it needs to be done. Took a whole lot of police to surround 2 people that were gathering up building supplies to finally run it all the way up and figure out it was okay for us to do that, right? We weren't breaking any laws. We were just doing. And then this is me down here at the corner running a workshop with high school students to figure out how they wanted their neighborhood to be, because no one else was engaging the high school students, right? It's all the adults in the room figuring out what they want their community to be when it builds back. And I kept saying, gosh, somebody else should really engage the students. Somebody needs to engage the young people. Somebody. And my sister said, why don't you do it? That's kind of your thing, right? You're a school teacher. You've done that. You know how to work with kids. And it never occurs to me, no matter how many times I do it, I still fall back into thinking someone else who's smarter needs to be doing this stuff. I'm not the expert, right? That would be crazy. It's a sad time when you come out and you're like, wow, turns out I'm the one that's going to have to fix this. That feels like a heavy burden. So the way that this connects to resilience is, the antithesis of resilience is sitting around waiting for someone else to fix something. So activism, getting up and just doing it, whether the system is in place or not, whether the system is with you or it isn't, activism is really at the heart of resilience, right? When you're just like, you know what, something needs to be done and I guess I'm going to be the one to do it. So we've all heard this definition of resilience. I don't know if we've all heard it. I've heard it a lot, and it confuses me every time I hear it. Resilience is the capacity of individuals and systems to survive and adapt and grow in the face of stresses and shocks. Resilience is about making communities and systems better prepared, and they're able to bounce back more quickly. And I think, what does that mean? I mean, philosophically, that sounds great. How do I know if I've achieved this? What do I do to go out and make this happen? It's really confusing, and I've been working in resilience for a decade. But when I hear the word described like this, it doesn't make any sense. So I felt like, what does this mean to me? What makes a person or a neighborhood or a place resilient? When the system is totally broken down, when you're left with nothing, no government, no structure, no system, when it's unable or unwilling to function properly, it's our individual ability to take care of ourselves and each other. That's what it drills down to. It's your ability to just stand up and say, you know what, I am the activist. I'm going to start doing it. I'm going to start fixing it. The system doesn't work with you. The system is an obstacle. Go around it. Just do. So this is a lot about where we are in our minds, right? Why does almost everybody in the room think that they're an advocate, but only 2 or 3 people think they're activists? And what I want to achieve today is for you to, in your mind, think that, you know what, I am the activist. Turns out I can be the doer. Because the only thing that's stopping us is the belief that someone else is better equipped to fix whatever it is than us. There's somebody smarter, there's somebody that's got more training in this, there's somebody that's got more time to devote to it. Because I spend 3 hours on Facebook, so I got a full schedule, I gotta take care of my kids, I got a lot of stuff to do. I don't have time to be an activist. And I'm certainly not equipped to be one, because I'm just a normal, regular person. And normal, regular people don't do stuff like that. They don't change the world. Really super special people do that. And that's certainly not me. So I want to talk about two activists that were just normal people. The first one is a woman who I saw on television. I was out in California when Katrina hit. And I felt like a lot of people that weren't living in Louisiana at the time, or in Mississippi, or in the Gulf Coast region, I felt very helpless. What can I do? What skills do I have to be able to go down there and help people that have lost everything? They're dead. There's dead people in the streets. Like, where do you even start? Helping. And there was a woman that came on TV and she was being interviewed, and she had gone down there and she was painting fingernails. This is the Superdome. This is people living for days in the Superdome. And she went down there with her nail kit and she was painting kids' fingernails. And the news anchor was like, why? These people have lost everything. I think they got bigger problems than needing their nails done. And she said, I was sitting at home in, Tennessee, and I saw this terrible thing happen, and I thought, oh my gosh, I gotta go help those people. And I don't know how to do anything other than paint fingernails. So I grabbed my kit and I went down and I set up and I started painting kids' fingernails. And she was like, they were like, that seems so ridiculous. And she said, what I know is that for the kids whose nails I've painted, they are able to escape out of this for 10 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour. They're running around showing everybody their pretty fingernails. And they are so excited about it. And I don't know how to do anything else. Like, this is what I do. And she made a difference. So that's just one normal woman that just took her nail kit down to Katrina, set up in the Superdome, nobody giving her permission, right? Well, who gave her permission to do that? The other woman, who I've had the great pleasure to meet, her name's Jody Williams. She is one of the 7 living female Nobel Peace Prize winners. And Jody Williams is from a town of about 1,600 people in Vermont. She's a tiny little town. And she says all the time, like, there is nothing that makes me special. The only thing, if anything, does make me special, it's just my willingness to, like, dig in and change things. And she committed her life to getting rid of landmines because she saw an injustice in the world. Children and women and people working in the field were blowing up because of landmines that were left from, decades and decades and decades ago. So she organized, started a nonprofit, she joined together. Now there's 90 NGOs around the world working. They've dismantled millions of landmines. She is a Nobel Peace Prize winner. And she's like, I'm just a normal person. And she says, everybody must get up and do something. That's all I did. I just woke up, saw an injustice, and started doing. And now she's constantly like, it's not enough, it's never enough. And once you become an activist and you start seeing yourself as that, it's never gonna be enough. So now you're like, hey, you know what? That's cool, Laura, I dig it. I feel like I got an inner activist that I'm willing to let loose a little bit. So you're ready, how do you become an activist? Right, where do you even start? Because the problems are like so big and so insurmountable. Well, it's actually pretty easy, turns out. You have to figure out what do you want to change, and it doesn't have to be related to your job. There are things I'm certain that you think about in your neighborhood, even if you're a planner, or you're an architect, or you're somebody that works within a governmental system. There's probably things in your regular life you're like, man, I just don't think I can impact change. Well, first figure out what it is that you want to change, and then figure out if that's really the thing that needs to be changed, right? Ground truth it. We're going to give you a tool that's going to help you figure out what the thing is that you need to change. And then collaborate with others, because I guarantee you, no matter what you're angry or upset or frustrated with, there are other people that feel that same way. Last night after the Pechacuchas, I went to a bar next door and I was talking to a couple of people, just random people, and they were like, why are you in town? And they were passing through and we started chatting. And the guy ended up telling me where he lives, he is really frustrated with where he lives. There's a lake, and he was like, by the way, this is a Champagne problem, but like my slough that I live on, they need to dredge it, and the boats can't get in. I was like, hey, Champagne problems, but you know what? For him, this is a frustration. And I said, how many people live on your street that feel the same way? And he was like, well, there's like 15 houses. And I said, and how many sloughs are there on the whole lake? And he was like, 50. And I was like, that's a lot of people that are probably frustrated. If you guys got organized, and he was like, ooh, organized, that sounds like something somebody else should do. And I said, here's the great thing. I bet if you just met with your neighbors, you may not be willing to be the one that's gonna do this, but I bet you, out of all those people, there's somebody that's like, hey, I love organizing things. I love getting behind this. Yes, this is my mission. This is what I'm gonna change. We all have something. So collaborating with others is the best way to get stuff done. So today, we're gonna give you some tools that help you figure out ways that you can unleash that inner activist. Find resilience through being the doer. The first person that I'm going to have come up and speak with you, her name is Priska Waynes, and I'm not going to give a traditional, like, Priska's done all these fancy things, which she has. But I met Priska a couple of years ago when I was working with the New York City Housing Authority. I plopped down after disasters like Sandy, and I find the gaps where people have blinders on and they're missing something. So the New York City Housing Authority was like, hey, we're going to harden all our buildings, and we're going to put all these generators up on top of them, and you know, we're still going to have all these poor people living in the flood zone, but let's don't talk about that. What did we miss? And I said, well, what about your outdoor spaces? Because they're going to harden the buildings with $1.2 billion worth of money. Harden the buildings. And I said, what about the outdoor spaces in New York City? No, hadn't thought of that. No stormwater management, no reconfiguring the outdoor spaces to be better for people to actually live in. So I called up all the smartest people that I know, and I asked them for a list of names of all the smart people that they know, because I'm all about collaborating. And Priska's name was one of the ones that came up, and she's from down in New Orleans, and she's one of the preeminent minds in stormwater management, amongst many other things in being a good human. And she's going to talk to you guys about a tool that helps you aggregate data in order to set priorities. Because once you've figured out the thing that you want to change, you need to be able to, there's probably a lot of things, and you need to figure out how to spend your finite resources and set a priority list, because there's a lot to be done. So after Priska speaks, then I will introduce Dr. Acom. Thank you.
This is a fantastic company to be in. I wish we had more time, because I would love to learn what you are all working on. We were asked to speak a little bit about what made us realize we were an activist. So I've been very engaged in Gulf Coast recovery in the last 15 years, various events, and also in Hurricane Sandy work. And so, there's when we have threats that we're aware of, and they may be coming in patterns where we weren't planning for them, that's one thing. But I think what we're seeing now is that every community is at risk in some way, shape, or fashion. And often the threats are coming from directions that we really don't anticipate. And what drives me in this work as a recovering architect and scientist and just humanist is that resilience is the unifying concept that ties together ecological and also social systems. And I don't find that there's any useful solutions that don't engage both of those pieces actively and leverage them. And that's really the hallmark of my work. So I wanted to talk about August 2016, Louisiana. Hot and sweaty, as you all know. Nothing really forecast for the day, just a normal summer day, usually afternoon showers. There was an afternoon shower that started on August the 9th. Within 2 days, it had become one of the largest storms ever to hit America. It was second only to Sandy in terms of being a catastrophic storm under certain definitions by HUD. And it came into a situation where within a very short space of time, a lot of communities were experiencing over 20 inches of rain within 24 hours. Now Louisiana, which is just, New Orleans, which is just down the road a little bit, is the third wettest place in America, and we get on average 64 inches of rain per year. There was one community that actually recorded 40 inches in 24 hours. This is absolutely unheard of. And it is characteristic of a new kind of superstorm that is hitting both sectors of the world in terms of north and south of the equator, and it's called a rain bomb. And it's characterized by getting 2 to 4 inches of rain within an hour. They are incredibly intense storm events. They are often unforeseen, and they're usually caused by some kind of hydrologic feedback loop that comes from warmer temperatures in oceans. We've had in the last 6 years not only the largest increases annually in terms of heat, but also the largest ranges in those increases. and our oceans are on average now an inch warmer, sorry, 1 degree warmer an inch, leading to 1 inch of sea rise level. And so, but in any case, so what we're starting to see now is that we're getting these environmental feedback loops that are completely radically changing our understanding of what risk means for our communities. So communities who are never experienced floods and things before are now, and they're going to be recovering for years. And this is what it looks like. This is what a typical afternoon rainstorm looks like in the south. That's when you get your normal little rainstorm. This is what it looked like in this area. I mean, I'm laughing, but it was completely unexpected. Leading to this kind of flooding, people being killed, over $1 billion worth of damage within just a community. And I wanted to tell you about this woman, Angelique. She is a lifelong New Orleanian. She was a 4th generation New Orleanian. In fact, her parents lost everything in Hurricane Camille in the 50s. She and her family here lost everything in Katrina, 10, 11 years ago. And they made a decision that they no longer wanted to have that level of risk in their own lives. And they made the decision to move to Baton Rouge, cutting so many cultural and personal ties in order to do so. And then they moved to Baton Rouge, and within a couple of years, they were right at the epicenter of this massive rain bomb, and they lost everything again. And I think working with this family and others in the Baton Rouge flooding is what actually turned me into an activist. I work with coastal communities, we know what to expect, but we no longer are building our cities or our communities in ways that are going to really support growth, healthy quality of life and growth. And one of the things that really becomes striking, especially when you work in the equity and justice areas, is that transference of wealth in the lower income communities comes in the form of property. And so if you are consistently, per generation, losing your assets, you are unable to transfer that wealth, and it's having huge knock-on impacts on people, and it's also creating huge amounts of depression and stress. And so what do you do with that information? Well, part of it is working with people who are on the ground, the grassroots level, the individual community activists, the nonprofits, the community organizers, the people who leave the commercial sector and government sector to go into the community to bring their resources to try to help them organize. But that even that has been happening for many years now, and it's not getting us to this place of resilience. So today I just want to talk about 2 tools that really help with the public-private partnership aspect of this, where we are all at the table having the same conversation with one another. So as a professional working in this field, and even just as an interested party, I think we're all fairly well aware of all the various things that start to aggregate to lead to kind of climate impacts, and they come from various points of interest for people. If you take heat islands, some people have the interest in the energy piece and the carbon piece. Some people are much more concerned about the social piece, what happens when, in Chicago it gets really hot and a lot of old people die. We know that we have to, reshape our landscapes, because if we do so, it can help with some of the worst cases of flooding. But we don't really know where to start bringing all these pieces together. So I found this particular tool very helpful. I wanted to talk to you about the Climate Smart Cities tool from the Trust for Public Land. It basically works with all of these sectors, and you can bring in any question in the resilience toolbox, any angle, whether it is from a climate adaptation standpoint, whether it's from a social justice standpoint, whether it's from an economic development standpoint, and it builds off a series of data to allow you to do very thoughtfully constructed searches on questions, and it will deliver to you answers on where you can have the most impact within your community. So it has 4 pieces. Connect is related to transport and optimizing it. Cool is related to health risks in cities. Protect is related to climate. And Absorb is related specifically to stormwater management. And it's really to be able to not only just do the kinds of projects that we're all used to, but to look at every project that we're doing. If it's a reforestation project, if it's a community project out in the woods, if it's reworking playgrounds, if it's just taking a disused commercial corridor and turning it into a greenway. Any of these can be climate adaptation projects. So what it does is you basically go into your particular area of interest. That one was around water management, but since we're at a smart growth conference, I picked one around transport, where you can, it brings in all the data sets. You as a government and as a city partnership bring in all the available data sets for your community. And that can be everything from health metrics and your infrastructure pieces and national climate data being downloaded. And what it does is it works with you to give you very specific demographic data on who's using it and how. It works to give you actionable information that you can use to prioritize specific projects. And it pulls off of this data laboratory and models around specific impacts that you want to have with any funds that you want to invest or projects that you want to do, or particular components of, like certain segments of your population that you want to engage and impact. What it does is it gives you a whole series of questions which you set up as you import your data. So this is, where is the vulnerable stormwater areas that also have overlying heat island issues that are on areas of transportation corridors that need to be improved in the area of low-income households. And it'll generate a map for you showing you where all those, not only areas are, but specific parcels that can bring specific value to you if you were to do a project there. We ran this in New Orleans. One was around where should we do green infrastructure, another is where is the heat island effects. And when you aggregated those together and got it to a parcel level, it gave us all of these properties in a prioritized fashion where we should think to invest our funds and focus our efforts. And that's what's really amazing about it, is when you get a map like that, you can actually click on any parcel you're interested in it, and it pulls up all the parcel-specific data from the owners to the tax information and anything else you would need to do to make a decision on whether you could potentially move forward with utilizing that property. So this is Jad Daly. He's the brain behind the tool, and if you have any more interest in working and talking about it, you can contact him directly at Trust for Public Land, or also Sean Breidemeyer, who is now publicly representing it. Thanks.
Thank you. So, Dr. Acom is just finishing up, and he is headed back to his to the web, where he's going to join us. And in the interim, while we're waiting for him to join, I'm going to pass something out. This is one of the tools that I'm going to go over after he presents. Let's pass these out. There you go. You guys, questions?
So I'm Kenneth Walker with NOAA, and I just wanted to put in a plug for the TPL tool. We helped fund the work in New York after Sandy, when they developed the Green Infrastructure Decision Support Tool.
What does TPL stand for?
The Trust for Public Land.
Okay, thanks.
And we are they're applying this model in different communities around the country. NOAA is also partnering with them in Ohio, working with communities in both Cleveland and Sandusky. But I think we found a lot of the value with the tool in New York was that TPL was able to provide the tool to local partners such as the New York City Planning Department, New York City Parks and Rec, the State Department of Environmental Conservation, and they could all do their own queries based on their interests. So if they were interested in vulnerable populations or parks or water management, they could really use the tool for their own queries, and we think it's really valuable.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I was afraid I was out of time, so I didn't do that. But I would just want to say that, to me, also the value is any community can access the tool, and the value of it is going to be as strong as the data you're able to bring to it. But it is scalable for everybody, and is equally applicable in every situation.
I have a question about how this tool has been linked to, say, pre-disaster mitigation work funded by FEMA, and if there's been any opportunities to create those kinds of linkages to develop any sort of proactive investment in the places that you're identifying.
Yeah, that's a great question. Not in it, as you may know of some, but
So in New York,
In New York, I do know that the tool was used to help leverage the HUD resilience funding that the city of New York got, and they were using the tool to prioritize some of those investments.
So now that those HUD funds are gone, and there might be additional resources flowing through the hazard mitigation community, I'm wondering if there's a way to make a linkage.
I think that's a great suggestion, and a link that something that we should look at as follow-up.
Yes, that is a municipality-specific decision. I'm not aware of any pathways that have officially been set up where this becomes an acceptable vetted metric for whether or not something should get funded. But what I will say is in New Orleans, we were so pleased with the outcome and how it brought transparency to the conversation, because it was equally informative to federal agencies as it was to the neighbor down on the road where the work was going to happen. It brings a clarity of purpose and thought process to the conversation that allows everyone to engage, and it really opens it up to look at why certain decisions are being made the way that they are. And what we find is the minute that people see that you're being open about where the priorities were laid, and they can have a conversation about it, they are very accepting of the outcomes of it. So I think the potential is huge for that. Certainly, I know that now that we use it as a matter of course, because we just find that it illustrates our decision-making process the best, of any.
So one of the things that we're going to do is during the interactive working session, we're going to use the pieces of paper that I gave you. This is essentially what I call a diagnostic tool. So there are 3 components for what we're going to achieve before we get to cocktails at 5:15. There are 3 tools. So the first tool is going to be one that I'm going to run through with you, which is the diagnostic tool called Change. And then we're going to look at how, with a specific instance that you have in your life that is either professional or personal, we're going to run through this, go through the diagnosis, get to exactly what the list of to-dos would do, and then see how the tool that Priska has discussed is applicable to what you need at home, right? Because I find that tools are so hard for at least me to understand in the nebulous, right? Like it's a thing and that looks cool, but I don't understand how it applies to me. Because I'm an interested citizen, right? I don't work in planning, so does this even matter? Like I can just head to another session. So there's a way for even this tool. I love that it's open source and it's available to everyone. So you don't have to have a fancy job where like this is your thing and you work for the government and you have control, right? So our job here today is for you to start seeing, I have control and power to change the things that I'm frustrated with, whether or not the government system is in place and functioning, right? Because we find out every day that the thing called bureaucracy is the thing where great ideas go to die. And what can we do to protect our great ideas and make them happen and become resilient, right? How can we share this? And that's going to be through this activist mentality. Okay, so it looks like Dr. Acom is available. And I met him at a Congress for New Urbanism event conference that was a couple of years ago, and found him to be just a really inspirational speaker. And in addition, a really brilliant mind that has created a tool that allows, for you to have a ground truthing mechanism to see if your assumptions for what's happening out in the world, see if they're true, and 2, it allows you to collect that in a tangible form of data, and 3, you're collecting that data from real users out in the world, real human beings that are walking around on the streets, and allowing them to both help your information that you assume be more accurate, and allowing them to actually participate in the process and become more engaged and interested in the things that you're trying to change in the city. So let's see if I can get him pulled up. Hi. Let's see if I can get you full screen. Can you hear us? Antwi, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
All right, speak loudly so that we can hear you. And I'm gonna try and figure out how to make your face bigger on this screen, and I'm not doing a very, oh. Okay, I think you have control. We can see your presentation.
Great. Hello everyone, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. We're actually launching Streetwise, the platform that I'm about to speak to you about, in Oakland today, so I was unable to make it, so my apologies. And very grateful to be a part of this panel with Laura and Priska. Their work is amazing, and so I'm honored to be a part of it. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a professor at UCSF in the medical school. My work is really around community-generated big data and participatory technology, and health information communication technology, and participatory research. I'm also a professor at San Francisco State University and the only college of ethnic studies in the United States. Many people ask, well, what's the relationship between having a joint center between UCSF and San Francisco State College of Ethnic Studies, but those are some of the populations that are most impacted by health disparities, and there's also a lot of genius that is happening in low-income communities and communities of color that is often overlooked. Today I've come to talk to you briefly about a platform that I have developed along with the co-founder, Ekta Shah, who's here right next to me, who's at Stanford University, called Streetwise. And Streetwise was named by Atlantic City Lab as one of the 12 new innovative data tools to help Americans climb the economic ladder. The former administration, that's a picture of myself in the upper left-hand corner with the former chief data scientist for the United States, DJ Patel. That's Ekta, who I just talked about, and that's a community member from New Orleans in the bottom of that picture. In the middle, GreenBiz has talked about Streetwise as one of the few platforms as we nest this conversation and moving from advocacy to activism. Streetwise is one of the few platforms that really can measure different forms of resiliency. Cultural resiliency, social resiliency, physical resiliency, and climate resiliency. And the former President Obama has mentioned our collective work a number of times in the Opportunity Project. These are some of the articles that are out there on Streetwise that either mention us or feature our work. And I started with our work with the Obama administration because I actually really wanted to talk to you all about the changing political climate. As you know, the Trump administration has just put basically a gag order on the EPA. They've frozen funds with the EPA. We have new leadership at HUD and a very significant change of leadership and change of focus at HUD. And we also see that they're pushing a bill through to no longer collect racial disparity data. And I think this whole idea of not collecting racial disparity data is a way to continue to marginalize vulnerable populations and continue to make folks more invisible than in some instances we already are. So we built Streetwise to address these kinds of issues. And the real challenge of the 21st century, in our view, is how do we reimagine and redesign our cities for communities that have been locked out of sustainability conversations, locked out of shareable city conversations, locked out of smart city conversations, and locked out of social justice conversations. Will we redesign our cities for rich people or for poor people, for people of color or for white folks, for eco-haves or eco-have-nots? And who will have a say in how we redesign our cities and reimagine our cities? Will it be powerful elites or will it be everyday people? And we think that we need to begin to redesign our cities not for, but with our communities that have been disproportionately impacted by the two greatest challenges of our lifetime, which are climate change and income inequality. So for us, we think that we have not correctly identified the problem. We think that the EPA and HUD, the U.S. Green Building Council, eco districts, Green Star, many of these certification and rating systems on the left-hand side, we think they've done a brilliant job of creating top-down tools for the design of the built environment. And we refer to that as the hardware. But what we think is missing from the conversation is really the software. That is, all of you's lived experience in this room. The power of place, what you know to be happening on the ground level. How is that being picked up in these conversations about urban planning and community engaged design and what makes smart cities? And we think the real missing link is equity, and we frame it around a framework called people-powered placemaking, which refers to real-time two-way communication with everyday people so that communities can participate in the design solutions that impact their everyday lives. And the way we implement a people-powered placemaking framework is through Streetwise, and what Streetwise is a mobile mapping and SMS platform that collects real-time information about how you all in this room, everyday people, are experiencing cities and services and turns that into actionable analytics. And our platform addresses these two key questions about how can we have more inclusive community engagement processes and how can we use data to make better and more community-informed decisions. In a nutshell, how do you democratize data and how do you democratize decision-making? And I'll give you an example of the kinds of contextualized data, the kind of data happening beneath the regulatory radar that Streetwise is able to pick up. Walkability is a great example, and I'm going to go counterclockwise here, but how walkable is my neighborhood? Right now we have WalkScore. WalkScore was also part of the White House cohort on the Opportunity Project with us. WalkScore is great, but it doesn't differentiate between different kinds of amenities like liquor stores and grocery stores. So you could be living in a food desert and actually have a very high WalkScore. Or WalkScore doesn't say that many of the guys in the room feel safe walking down this one alley in St. Louis, but when Laura and Priscilla walk down that same street and other women in the audience, that's where they're getting catcalled. Right? Where is that kind of data being picked up in a systematic way? Right? There's all of this activity happening beneath the regulatory radar that we have not figured out a way to systematically capture until now. Streetwise captures this kind of data around walkability, this local data and local knowledge around how well is my community served by public transit. Yeah, only you who lives in that hood knows that the bus only is supposed to come on Thursdays, but it really comes on Wednesday at 2 o'clock. Or where can I buy fresh, affordable, healthy food? A good doctor, where do I go if there's an emergency? As I said, we were the only real-time crowdsourced platform to be invited to the $1 billion National Disaster Resiliency Competition. And there what emerged was this gap between official knowledge and local knowledge in terms of where do we go for an event around emergency preparedness. And when we asked the jurisdictions, what's the official place that you're supposed to go? Many of the jurisdictions were like, we don't know the official place. But we said, well, where would you go if there was a tornado right now in the middle of St. Louis? People were like, we would go to the local church, which is also the healthcare center, which is also a tutorial center. And our point is having that kind of systematic data completely transforms how we prioritize public investment in emergency services. And we need to move the conversation away from surviving resiliency, which is about one form of emergency preparedness, to thriving resiliency, which is about how do you increase a community's social capital, social cohesion, and social connectedness. Streetwise does that and answers questions about what are the issues that people really care about in my community. We also ground truth data, as Laura talked about, and so what you're looking at right now is a map of East Oakland where the purple dots represent grocery stores. You can just imagine this, go into your own imagination and begin imagining what some of the neighborhoods look like from the communities that you're from. And here on this map in East Oakland, those are supposedly grocery stores. If you went to Open Oakland, this is the map you would see. This is the available local open source data. And it looks like East Oakland is a veritable food oasis. But when you ground truth that data with Streetwise, what you realize is that instead of those being grocery stores, they're actually liquor stores and corner stores. And only a handful of them are grocery stores. And at the same time, using Streetwise, you can upload pictures and audio and video, and you can rank the quality of the services that you're receiving in the community. And allowing the integration of social media and allowing people to tell their own stories is a key component to that shift in moving from advocacy to activism. It's also very important that Streetwise is in multiple languages. So we started with monolingual Spanish-speaking populations, and we're actually building out Mandarin and Cantonese, and we can build out a language in a matter of 6 weeks. The multi-dimensional multimedia component is also important because we're able to reach low literacy populations through pictures and through audio and through video and other ways to tell stories. Right now we're going to quickly play for you a video about a young woman's experience in that neighborhood in East Oakland of the food environment in terms of food security.
Okay, so what are you, let's see, what are you looking at? How was it when you went inside?
It was dirty when I went inside, and I would never eat anything in there. Hell no. Because they don't sell any groceries, and it's just a bunch of junk food in there. And I mean, they have little sandwiches, but I would never eat that because it's dirty. And then all the fruit is all like old, like wrinkly, it looks old. And then all the like meat that they did have, like the bacon and all that in the little thing, it's like it's been sitting in there for about a year or something like that. I wouldn't call it a grocery store at all. So, hell no, I wouldn't eat there.
So right away, you can get a sense of how people are experiencing their neighborhoods and communities in real time. You can also begin to share your stories and best practices across time and space. So people in St. Louis can talk to Detroit, Detroit can talk to Oakland, Oakland can talk to Dakar, Senegal. On the back end, you're able to have key performance indicators that we come up with in concert with the community. These are some of the ones that eco districts wanted to use. And we have had tremendous success with our work so far. We're currently in private beta, but all that means is that we are picking our partners very carefully and launching in selected cities. In San Diego, they used Streetwise and they identified arsenic in the water, and the policy win was to create more safer drinking water for school children in San Diego. In Merced, California, they used Streetwise to identify the spatial mismatch between where residents live and where jobs are located, and we were able to narrow the transportation gap so that more busing and transportation options were closer to vulnerable populations. And in East Oakland, we showed you how we were able to transform food deserts into food oasis. The value of Streetwise is that it creates more democratic models of civic engagement. It gives communities a way to collect, analyze, and share data. It's a bottom-up process where local knowledge meets community-engaged design. It helps to prioritize public investment, co-benefits, and multi-problem solving. And it's one of the few tools, it's not the only tool, but it's one of the tools out there that can help create more sustainable, shareable, equitable, and just communities, which is more important in these times now than ever. Thank you very much for your time. We hope to hear from many of you in the audience, and we look forward to building with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's give Dr. Anselm a round of applause. Thank you, Anthony. Do you have just a moment if there's any questions from the audience?
I do, yes. Go ahead, audience.
All right. Does anyone have a question? That he's feeding in the microphone from the laptop up here, so I will need to repeat your question in if you can't hear. Yes, sir.
So we heard a review of the one young lady at the store. Has there been any pushback from businesses about, negative characterizations of their businesses?
The question is, has there been any pushback from businesses about, negative feedback from people saying bad things about them?
Hi everyone, my name is Ekta and I'm the co-founder of Streetwise. I'm happy to be here with you guys today. That's a great question. We actually did talk a lot with the local businesses and liquor store owners, and it was a positive story. What we found was that through this work, the liquor store owners realized that people in the community actually did want to buy healthy food and there was a demand for it. Previously, they had the misguided notion that people wanted to only buy liquor and candy and chips because that's what they were selling the most. But through this process, they identified a need for healthy food. We identified the California Fresh Fund, which allows liquor store owners and other corner store owners to apply for low interest loans so that they can then purchase things like large refrigerators and other infrastructure to support fresh and healthy produce.
I would add to that yes, it works very much like Yelp in the ways that Yelp can hurt or help a business. Streetwise can hurt or help a business. And what we have found is 70% of Yelp users are white. Nothing wrong with that. What we're saying is that there's been a very low penetration of Yelp in low-income communities and communities of color. And small business owners have actually been very excited about having a mechanism that would elevate the great business that they have, right, in the community. And so I think you're pointing out something that's really important. The platform does make things more equitable, more accountable, and more transparent by creating these two-way feedback loops between business owners and residents and between communities and cities. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Streetwise? Yes, ma'am.
I'm just wondering, is it usable throughout the United States, or the focusing on the areas that are shown on the map?
The question is, are you using this across the United States, or is it just focused with the places that you are showing on the map right now?
We're using it across the United States, and in fact, we're a platform provider for 100 Resilient Cities, which is international. We've been contacted by Thessaloniki, Greece, and Rotterdam, Amsterdam, and some places recently in Latin America and Africa. So there's been a lot of interest in the platform, and if you are interested, we would love to have a conversation and find out what your project is and how we might be able to support and collaborate.
Just so it's not publicly available, so in the city, it is available nationally through private beta launch. And so if you've tried to download it in the App Store, it's not out quite yet, but it will be out later this year or early next year.
Fantastic. And I think what Dr. Akam said earlier was that they are carefully selecting their partners while it's in beta. So if you feel like that you have a good reason why you would make an excellent partner, we're going to put his contact information back up so that you have that to take with you if you want to reach out to him by email. I'm sure he would appreciate that. Yes, ma'am.
So I just went online to streetwise.org and I filled in a little note. Will they get back in touch with me, or do we need to email them with our project that we're interested in?
So we have some digitally fantastic people in the room, and we have a woman that has already sent a note to you through streetwise.org, and she wanted to know if, pardon?
Streetwise.com.
Yeah, Streetwise is spelled.
It is
Oh, she said yes, that's great, streetwise.com. So she says that her question is that sufficient, or does she need to send you an email directly, or will someone be back in touch with her through the contact on the website?
If you just directly email us, that would be great, because that'll give us context from this conversation. Through the website, we get a lot of input, so a direct email would be great. And I'll pull up a screen with our email addresses on it.
Fantastic. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, just building on that. So I'm from Washington, D.C. D.C. is now one of the 100 resilient cities, and I work on the equity platform.
Can you guys hear her?
No, it's better when you repeat the question, please.
Yeah, here.
Sure, thanks.
Speaking, I think.
So I'm here from Washington, D.C., and we are one of 100 Resilient Cities' newest cities.
and so I am helping advise around the equity platform. I used to work with the district government, now I work with a nonprofit, and I too just sent you an email through Streetwise. So I'm guessing, when I'm really interested in bringing the platform to the district for a whole host of reasons, particularly around building resiliency hubs. We just released a climate adaptation plan for the city. We did a vulnerable population study, and exactly what you all are proposing is exactly what I'd like to produce for the city. And so I'm going to really flag that in my email to you when you put that up. And thank you for your time.
What's your name?
My name
What's
is
your name?
Rhonda Chapman.
Okay, yeah, we look forward to see our emails. Can they see our emails? Can you see our emails up on the screen? There should be one for Tessa, who leads community engagement and outreach, and one for Ekta, who's sitting right next to me, and she's the co-founder.
We can't see it yet. Oh, hold on, you know what? I think I've got the screen. There we go, let's see. Making you little and your screen big. There we go. All right, there's the contact information. I'm gonna blow this up bigger. tcruz@streetwise.com and ekta@streetwise.com.
Perfect.
And we'll have that available again for all of you here. So were there any last questions for Dr. Acom? And if not, then we will jump into the interactive portion. And again, we're going to make sure that his contact information is available to you, because one of the parts of the interactive workshop that we're going to be doing is talking through how something in your community, how could you use this tool or this type of platform to make your response to whatever your problem is much richer and more meaningful to the people that are living within a condition. Any last questions for Dr. Acom? Yes, one more.
Can you just give an example of the types of projects that they might be interested in?
She wanted to know if you can give an example of the types of projects, when you say that you're looking for strategic partners, the types of thing that you're looking for. Is there a specific thing?
No, it's so much more contextualized than that. I mean, if you have any interest, it's a low bar. We're totally open to thinking. My co-founder's giving me that look. Okay.
I was going to give some examples, but I agree that we're interested in partnering with folks who see this and are excited by it.
Right.
I think that's the critical thing, is just you see it, you see yourself in it, and you're excited by it. Examples of things here in Oakland, we're working around using Streetwise around climate resiliency, which we talked about. In Newark, we did stuff around environmental justice and mapping environmental hazards and assets. We also do work around mapping cultural assets, food deserts. It can be a range of different things.
Fantastic.
I think, just one more thing. I think having resources helps. I think there's a lot of people, or being able to really work in collaboration and partnership to build those resources is important to being able to really pilot and do high quality work.
Fantastic. Let's give him one more round of applause. Thank you so much for joining us. We know that you're very busy, and we'll let you get back to the next thing that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Good luck with the launch.
Yeah, good luck with the launch. We wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
You're a great man. Take care.
Bye. So what we're going to do now is jump into the doing part, because we feel that it's really important for you all to have something that you can take home with you, and something that you can go to work on Monday or go home and sit down with your family and say, there's a thing that's really been bugging me for a long time, and I feel my inner activist, swelling up within me, and I'm ready to take it on. I was really inspired by this session that I saw at New Partners. So I'm going to give you an example of how we're going to use this diagnostic tool, and once we run through it, then what we're going to do is in your mind be thinking about, an actual problem that you're up against, and hopefully this will help you understand. So the letters are kind of wonky because apparently Macs and PCs not so friendly. So you should, on the piece of paper that you have, you'll see the letters across the top for change. And each letter, it's an acronym, and each letter is a step in the process. And the reason that I created this tool is because it was very frustrating to me to be so passionate about something that really bothered me and get all these people together and start working and really feel like I was doing a good job and get the thing accomplished that I wanted to do, and then it not actually have the impact that I thought that it would have, and then I felt really bummed and depressed and like everything's a failure and what's the point of trying anything anyway. So the goal of the tool is to give you a resource to make sure that you're addressing the right thing. So I worked with the city of West Texas. I work in disaster recovery, and that sort of hybrid between disaster recovery and sustainable community planning. And what I've learned is that I'm called in when people think they know their problem, right? They have in their mind like we have a bad thing and we need to fix the thing. And the thing that they think that they need to fix is never, ever, ever the thing they actually need to fix. And the goal of this tool is to run you through and figure out the things that you're actually going to have to go up against and who you need to partner with to do that. So the first thing on the spreadsheet that you're going to fill out is the condition, right? And this is like a doctor, right? You go to see the doctor and he says, oh, what brings you in today? Or she, by the way. My mom is a doctor and she hates it when I use a male acronym on that, so pronoun. So what's your condition? What's the problem that you want to cure? So what is it that you're up against? And so as you're in your mind, go ahead and like think through that. And if there's something that's like on the forefront of your mind that you're like, man, you know, the cars go way too fast in front of my house. That is something that has really irked me for like the 10 years that I've lived there. That's the thing I want to focus on, whatever it is. So go ahead and think in your mind if you want to jot down, maybe there's a couple of things. If you're like me, you get frustrated by almost everything in the world. So I have lots of these sheets filled out. The next thing that we're going to do is dig into that and write down the history. So for West Texas, the condition that they had is that they had a massive fertilizer factory explosion. Does anybody remember seeing it on the news? Raise your hand if you remember West Texas. So what happened was, and it was very bizarrely reported, like in the beginning nobody really understood what happened, but this fertilizer plant exploded and it killed 16 people and it burned 265 buildings and 3 schools and a nursing home. It was insane. And so going to sit down at West Texas, you know, you start with the explosion. They'd never had one before. And so that was the thing that they wanted to deal. So it's 15 people, 150 buildings, 3 schools, and the nursing home. So the history was they'd never had any other explosions, but they did have all of their factories regularly getting fined for not following protocol. So it turns out that was something that had been going on for a long time with all of their factories. And they frequently had water shortages in West. And so you're like, oh, water shortages, that's probably hard to put out a fire if you don't have water. So in West Texas, what happened is there were actually 2 explosions. And the second explosion and the fire that raged out of control, and you're like, why did the fire department not just put it out? Well, it turns out there were a lot of pieces that went into what killed people and what burned up a huge portion of the city. So we dug into an assessment, and the assessment is you're gonna look at like, what were the factors that contributed to this condition that you wanna solve, right? And for West Texas, they had regulations that were in place that no one was following. I mean, like, no one in the factories was following these protocols. Maybe loosely, philosophically, but not literally. And they had not reported a lot of these protocols to like federal agencies, you know, so there were a lot of things that they were doing. Nobody was keeping an eye on making sure that they were complying. The fire spread really rapidly because it seemed crazy that an explosion happened in a factory and burned 150 buildings. That feels like the fire department wasn't on top of things, but they were. They were the first responders that were there. They got there, and that's actually was most of the people that died were the first responders, the firemen that rushed there to put that fire out. The residents and the students weren't evacuated. That was one of the big problems that they saw is like, that's one of the big problems that they saw is that they, you know, they didn't evacuate properly. They took a lot of time to fill the water pumper trucks. The other fire departments couldn't hook into their fire hydrants. Even if they had been able to couple to their fire hydrants, there was insufficient water to actually fight the fire. So if this had happened during a drought, it would have burned down the entire city because it turns out that they were regularly experiencing water shortages. The houses, the senior living facilities, and the schools were all destroyed. So once you run through this assessment, like these are the things that were happening and what allowed them to occur. So the next thing is for like a one-to-one parallel, and usually there are at least one thing, but sometimes you get 2 or 3 items over here. So the last OSHA visit was in 1985. That's probably a problem, right? So 1985 is a long time ago. And the feds were totally unaware of the large volumes of combustible material. There, by the way, in West Texas, no fire codes. No one's building to any sort of code. They don't need to do that because that's what freedom looks like. So no fire codes to contain a fire in a factory. What caused the second explosion was the first explosion set the fire. The fire spread really rapidly to the rest of the factory, caught other things on fire that caused the second explosion. And then because the firefighters' trucks and the firemen had been killed in that second explosion, the other trucks that showed up couldn't hook up to the coupling. There was only one fire hydrant. Nobody could hook to it because I'm sure somebody got a deal on fire hydrant couplings and saves a few dollars. And so none of the other firefighters could help put out the blaze. And that's why it raged on and burned so much stuff down. So there was no emergency response plan in place. That's why those kids were never evacuated. That's what put a lot of lives at risk. There was an insufficient number of fire hydrants. They weren't using universal couplings. Waco, it turns out, actually controls all of the water in West Texas. They pipe their water in from another city who could turn off the spigot at any moment. That, to me, was the root of where, because they were like, yeah, we need new fire hydrants. I was like, if we put in new fire hydrants, does it really solve your problem? Does it prevent this thing from happening again? So the G is for galvanize. This is once you've established the underlying, the real, right, this is a symptom. There are some deep underlying problems that we need to address here. One being water security. It's kind of a big deal. In addition to for fires, but your entire city is sitting here with no access to your own water source. So here are the things that we're going to need to do to address this. So if we don't have OSHA coming and the feds are not keeping an eye on this, we need to put in place a local enforcement. And we need to have classes, because I found that if people don't know why they're supposed to do something, they don't bother doing it because it seems stupid. So there are regulations in place. We need to teach them why they're in place, create the fire codes, create the emergency response plan, map out where the fire hydrants need to go, and then we get into the real root of things. We need to look at water security and how are you going to, they don't collaborate with the county at all, like in Alabama where I live. The counties and cities hate each other often and refuse to cooperate, and that creates some real problems. So at the end of the day, also zoning. They don't have zoning in Texas, right? Again, freedom. So we don't have that pesky thing that tells us that we can't build residential right next door to a factory that stores combustible material and may explode. And when you've worked through all of this, because people say, oh God, that looks like a lot. That seems complicated. That's the problem. If it was easy, this stuff would be fixed. It's not fixed because it's complicated and there are a lot of connected things. Once you've gotten through the things that you need to fix and how they need to be fixed, then you've got to figure out what piece can I take on. So if I'm not part of the government, I can't do any of this. That's not true. So here is where we started with residents, right? We started with residents to say, if you want to, from a resident perspective, get together with other residents that are scared that there's going to be another explosion and your kids are going to burn up in the school because nobody's keeping an eye on land planning. Identify other towns that have the same problem that are implementing successful strategies. Talk to other cities and find out how they were paying for these things. Bring in the local government and show them how many people are committed to helping achieve these goals, right? We're willing to tax ourselves to put in place a financing mechanism to start paying for, new wells to be drilled and an aquifer recharge system. So I want to go around the room. This gives you an explanation. Does anyone have a question about identifying your condition? Try and think through the history of how long has this street had cars driving really fast? Was it before your house was there, after your house was there? So think about the history. Run your assessment of what contributes to the condition. Answer the question of what allowed those things to be in existence in the first place. And then how do you treat this? Anybody have a question? Yes, ma'am.
I don't know, it's kind of a question, kind of a comment. I feel like this is exciting and I'm glad that you shared this with us and I'm really going to use it, so thank you for being generous. The other thought that comes to mind, though, is around demographics and making sure that we don't shy away from them, because that's very much a part of the conditions. It's very much a part of the reasons why a lot of these things exist. And so I don't think that we're doing ourselves or our communities justice if we don't call that out explicitly, because a lot of these things are affecting, as we all know, communities of color and low-income communities. So somewhere in there, and maybe it is a part of the history, I think that it should be part of the requirement when we do this to ensure that we address that and call it out as an exercise, because it's too easily tucked away.
Sure, absolutely. That is absolutely true. And so what we're going to do is optimally, we all have blinders, right? I have blinders on, and I can run through this and feel really good and confident that I've caught all this stuff because I'm so smart and so thoughtful. And I get down here, and let's say that I have missed the demographics piece, right, which is so critical. I get down here to expand, and there are two places that I hope that we catch the missing pieces, that being one of them. And there are other missing pieces, right? So much of what OnTweak talked about is those missing pieces that we forget about. We think of the structured tools that Priska, which that data is important, and it's like big data and little data, it's both important. And so when we go to expand and we engage those other people, hopefully we can catch it there. And then the other thing is, again, applying the Streetwise. We're going to look at how both of those tools will help you accomplish it. So if you utilize something like Streetwise that helps you ground truth, the reality of the people that are living in the neighborhood, your assumptions, you're going to find out pretty quickly, some of them are wrong. Like the things that you believe exist for other people, if you're not the one experiencing them directly, other people experience things differently. I'm always surprised that my sister and I have different concepts of our childhood. I'm sure if you've ever talked to a sibling or someone about that, you have totally different experiences if you grew up in the same house, much less if you're neighbors, much less if you live in a different neighborhood. So, fantastic point. Who here has started? Yes?
Sorry, I'm just wondering, in terms of using this tool, can you talk about the timeline? So are you thinking in the groups that you've used this with, is this an afternoon or is this months? I could see it being both, depending on the issue, and I'm just wondering what your experience is.
This tool is something that there are two pieces, right? There's both, I'm constantly going between the macro, the big giant system, and the micro, the little tiny piece that has to function. And I want people to both personally feel empowered that they, as an individual, have the ability to change the world, and both recognize that you on your own can't change the world, so both of those things. So I would say that this is a tool that one individual can sit down in their home and go through this, like, someone that is a stay-at-home mom that is frustrated with a thing, or a stay-at-home dad that is frustrated with a thing, could fill this out in an hour, and then the piece here, though, you have to rework it. So you have to identify the people, and then you got to go and find people, and then you got to rework this tool because you missed a bunch of stuff that you had no way to know.
Right.
So I would say that there's actually not an answer. It's whatever your thing is, and there's no specific timeline.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about it being used as a tool to work with groups and different parts of a community. So, like when you went and worked with this group in West Texas, like how long did it take the group to do this? And or do you not ever use this with a group?
Oh, yeah.
Are you saying it's only individual?
It is for cities, it is for individuals, right. Yes, and with a group, it depends on, so this usually happens pretty fast, right? You walk into the room knowing you got a problem. This one, the more people the more stakeholders you have, the fuller this area is gonna be, but you'll see it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. You start getting, this is where you spend a lot of time. Right? And this is where, again, once you've wrapped around for the second time and you have more people, every time you rework it, this section and this section get bigger. So I think that, you can spend within a group, we're going to spend 20 minutes on it here. So there's not I don't have a specific answer. You can spend an hour on it. It's how deep you want to go with it. It's how big you want your list to be, because systems are interconnected. And you're gonna inevitably end up, so when you start this, you're gonna like start out with 8 tidy things. By the time you've brought in other groups and you've reworked it, this is gonna end up being like 40 or 50 things. And over here, this will be like 60 or 70 things. So it's a tool that's intended to grow and be refined every time you run through the process because you're constantly redoing it. So the first time you do it, you may only spend like, an hour running through it if you're alone. If you've got more people that have more input, a couple of hours. This certainly, the more diverse your stakeholders are, if you're already starting out with 20 different groups at the table, you got a full afternoon in front of you, right? So the more people that you have engaged, the more comprehensive your list is gonna be, and the more invested the contributing groups are gonna be about, oh good, this is the thing I care about. I really only cared about bike lanes. And so I've got a bike lane piece, and now I know where my organization fits into this other thing that we're trying to fix. Does that make sense? So who here has filled out their sheet, and who needs help? So Priska and I are here to help you. Nobody. I see people have filled out their sheet. Don't be shy. Kenneth, I see writing on your piece of paper.
I was taking notes from this example, but I do have a question.
Yeah.
What if it's the police who are speeding in front of your house?
That is something that we can work through. This tool can be used for just about anything. So I want to get off the microphone. You guys work on this. Call Priska and I over. We're going to work on this for about 5 minutes. Run through it and tell me where you're struggling with something, because we want to learn from where, I'm having difficulty figuring this out. And then we want to look at how the tools that Priska and Dr. Acom presented. On the back, you can flip it over and be like, yes, I get how Streetwise can help me ground truth these pieces of information. I made some assumptions. I love engineers, God bless them, we certainly need them, but they like to sit in a room and look at a computer and know what the world is outside the door and never leave the door. So, the Streetwise tool combined with the aggregation that Priska has, feel free to utilize us, call us over. And if there are a couple of you that are all by yourself, come to the table and would y'all, come on, don't be scared, I know, come on. Yeah. Y'all are, so I want to do something real quick. Give y'all a few minutes to fill out these sheets, and then I'm going to ask you to do a little exercise. Thank you. Andrew, ladies, do you want to come meet your neighbors? They look relatively friendly. They're smiling. They'll probably be happier later this evening once they're done with all of this and have a glass of wine in their hands. Come on up.
Oh, I see.
There's some seats over here and some friendly people over here.
So who has a problem? They would love to. We may need a bigger piece of paper. We definitely will need a bigger piece of paper for that.
I was thinking something totally odd by work, and it's not a dedicated bike lane. It's a couple of intersections.
Yeah, we can see the problems.
Challenge to get through, and when you add these things, like
I bet you feel that
the
there are
intersection,
parts
they're
of
going
the
to make it
system
through
like this.
they're going to make it to the red line, and it's really dangerous as a biker. So, the things that I've tried to
So let's start with,
I've tried to go to some local
in order to-
meetings where they're talking about
problem that you're doing like
planning bike lanes.
in your organization.
There are things in the plans, but it's just, it's really hard. I want to see it. I want to see it in my neighborhood for my community to work. probably talk to more of my neighbors, and I mean, I think the whole kind of building a community, reaching out to people who have the same issue is really valuable, and I had thought, what if I talk to my neighbors, we all went to a meeting together or something, maybe our neighborhood would get bumped up the list or something. I mean, I definitely see that this would be helpful for certainly flushing out.
So if we start with that, if we start with, it sounds like the condition that you have is that you have a concern that the word equity and what that means may be lost in the process. Right, so let's start with, probably going to be equity, that would be one of the boxes checked. I find it community engagement.
I didn't know where they would start.
Yeah, like where
when
they
they need local regulation enforcement person, fire code.
Right.
That's a very good question.
So if we start there, then within, and we take it, keep it within your organization. Is there a history of this happening within your organization?
Should be a relationship between galvanize and expand people involved, being successful.
Let's name five.
Implementation from other communities. It's kind of implementation, I guess, but.
Okay, so let's put down administrative strategy. How are they left out of the, how do you feel
These are a lot of conflict. More conflict, I think.
Okay, the airport.
I mean, the airport was there, but there was.
I'm in Silver Spring.
Expansion of the airport. Two freeways and an airport. Those are big types of developments. Were there smaller things that have also happened?
Sure. I think it's there's very obvious.
Okay, perfect. Let's start with three. Sure. So if we start with those three, what factors
Or they'll turn right.
the inequity that happened? Let's say that. So what was it at that time that was happening that allowed the district or the actual? So let's put under assess, put their community, whatever the solution, what it was there was very vital.
Related to that, I think I'm always amazed that deputies have pretty good etiquette in DC, and I'll go someplace smaller, like in Charleston, South Carolina, I mean, they jaywalk, they dangerously, they'll just step out.
Okay, so that's the desire, right? They were just building the highway to be mean to people.
Why is there a better city?
So, one of the village has one of the to have them what? So there's cars around here.
No, I was saying in Charleston. When I go to small towns, people don't bother to walk.
Happening with Denver, right? If you've got a voice, it may or may not be in your backyard. Less likely to be in your backyard. And we're not doing this. So, the navigate piece is for the ones that came in assessment. So, no community.
Well, I think they've done that to try to increase awareness, and then once you hear that somebody got taken for jaywalking, you're probably much more likely to go to the court.
Instead of having to drive this road,
there's nobody
now you can drive all the other roads.
That's part of
So they're expanding transportation options.
part of the outreach
So,
on the issue.
what is the thing that led to the
Stick, not
I mean,
carrot.
other than it wasn't in the
Tickets, but something changed behavior. Because
solutions are
pretty
the engineered solutions
So-
are very expensive.
So with the navigation, we got racial, we got race and economic. Just everything, right?
Now the nuisance complaints happen.
you're in a town, you storms, cars are rushing around.
It's digging down another layer. similar, but it's just getting a layer deeper, right? So typically the first knee-jerk thing they'll say is like the bad things that they saw upstairs. And to navigate that now, why, to ask the question why. So, for example, there's a local community in Alabama, and New York City says they those people don't want to grocery.
But I bet.
Because we try to get that grocery store.
So
So I said, why do they don't want the grocery store?
And that's
And so I don't know.
there's money for materials by selling items by
So in asking the why, it was where they would consider a high criteria, and then you get trying to go a little bit higher because people will lost money in their pockets.
These are things that you can present to the teacher and say, hey,
So they actually
other
saw
schools have
the
done this to raise money.
That's what.
So that was like, yeah, another layer we gotta go down there. So, okay, so we've got the VSS, which is the conditions of no voice, and needing to expand on driving. So the no voice comes from,
We're okay with that. There you go. That's a great idea. And that's the
issues
understanding.
and, but you mind sharing issues, right? Why bother with this? Like, we're smart, that's why we have to go with the fancy name jobs in government instead of the things that people that are sure of. I think just also discrimination. And then we got, what allowed what was the cause of needing to expand the highway? What was the answer to that? These emissions and increasing traffic. No, I like that. So growing population, growing population. And the population growth doesn't intrinsically itself in the as we drive, right? So I'm guessing that, what do you do? So people live in different places than where they work. So let's put a distinction. Well, we've got geographical, different locations for where they are and where all. And we've got other density on the car.
I think it would be that we use this to at least start to flush out the issue and why is there a correlation at all?
So let's do the that one. So let's land value, right? So we take
Decide my daughter has too much to do that.
and then we sell it to the
Yeah, history. When I first noticed those sitting, so you know what I ended up doing? The smell was so bad. I was like,
took out
everything out for my shoulder with the closed specific drawers.
and we replaced it with something where there's no such
Drawers lanes.
So that also goes back to another thing that organization of your community and success. You've got,
So it's really reframing.
in the removal of social cohesion, you just lessen the chance of them having organization.
It's sustainable.
You're breaking, you're taking away the foundational components of people ideas and accomplishments. It's rarely the individual voice that's heard, it becomes the collective. You look at something like the Women's March, right, it wasn't about 10 women getting together in one place. There was that. It was the collective, how 167 cities was all doing it at once. That was like,
I think you would get to different,
if we take
strategies
away
or
their ability to have a voice.
actions that some would involve reaching out to your community members and doing more of organizing folks that are concerned about that issue.
So one of the things that
And there is the bringing the local government. I mean, if there's a regulatory solution, or they need to be, they need to come in. But those are probably two very different discussions. Yeah, you probably want to have the community folks organized before going to the city or local government.
In this neighborhood, are there places where?
Well, I mean, each of these activities can take on its own implementation, kind of plan, and audience.
Do you think that this is a way to just organize your internal process to attack something?
Yeah, one of my questions is how do you prioritize
really,
So if you looked
What-
at, there's a community center.
do you know this exercise of backcasting
And the reality
to get to the
is
vision
that
of
as great as the
accomplish
community senior center is,
in order to do that, you have to do that.
there are a whole
You
lot
have
of
to do
people
that.
right, they have very.
It's really like,
very
what do you have
small
to
bubbles.
do first to just get
Let's say
the
that
support
they have a
in
hugely successful
place and to get the
program
facts
that
right
they
so that you're big
regularly daily.
and then
There's, so like,
and then once you
and so the
have
question
the
becomes,
foundation, then
again,
how do you
with
elevate this issue?
with the organizations that are organized, great, who is not part of those organizations, right? There's some people that are left
And to
out
get
of
the
the conversation. Why?
That's
My aunts.
So usually, you know, the first pass of it is really just like getting everything down,
Demographic, they love
and then, but it also gets your head organized.
But I think
and
about
then
things
you can
like
go
that.
back
I
and
think
find
like-
and prioritize the relationships you can
No,
and also identify.
it's not. It's bizarre.
Partners.
But there's a, right, so the people that aren't part of formal organizations, there are there places in employment where people are going on a regular basis, like it may be totally outside of the neighborhood, right? It's 15 miles away, but it's the main manufacturing plant, and that's where actually a lot of people in this neighborhood work. So you could set up a parking lot, even though it's nowhere close to maybe you're gonna actually do a lot more neighborhood members.
Yeah, and that's really
In that
question. Yeah, I think
I look at daycare centers.
part of it is
we're
making sure that you really understand what the issues are before you
There are a lot
decide
of
what
people
you
that
can
have
have solution is.
bus stops are great.
Also identifying like what
Also,
you have the power to control yourself. And
it's
what
weird,
you're
but we still have time.
What do you need to have?
So if you've got this great highway that has all this traffic on it, it's probably because
What's
what's
the policy?
cars just staring at billboards. Billboards are a great way to say, text your ideas to this number. Or if you want to be on the email list for this thing,
Yeah, it's
you know,
really to help.
send an email to me.
Effective. And the other part of it is to be able to break it down.
They're stuck in
into
traffic
pieces
sitting
to
still,
see
so
not only where you can have
So-
impact on others,
So then after you've got things in this galvanized area, then go down the expand list and see like, again,
because
who are
it is easy
you,
to lose momentum.
who are you missing? Y'all are missing.
Too big or too
Who,
complicated.
think about the people that you have
But if you can
and
see
how
that you're actually
huge that is of the
making
whole,
progress,
and then figure out where the rest of them go. How do you get the rest of them?
and then
Yes, ma'am.
it makes you feel empowered.
Sure. Tell me what your condition is.
So here's a question, have you
Although I feel like there's just still a mess. I was just wondering, you know, like, so I mean, you're still, like, it's never, I mean, I can tell you for sure, my mom would never go on, like, go resident now, but obviously I've been like crazy with something.
How far
And
is it?
she'll go online and
When you
she'll,
text.
like, stuff, but yeah, they won't, you know,
Yeah.
never text. It's like, text.
So that's fantastic. I, in my mind, when you're saying that, I can think of 3 neighborhoods that have that exact, with the railroad tracks and the industrial area and the residential and air quality issues and everything.
Right, because there's a lot of
So the history of this, so the main thing that you're getting at is the trains blocking
family problems.
that creates this traffic. What's the thing that you feel like the most of it? The place to stop.
Well,
If the trains didn't stop there, it would stop there.
and they said, and they put it up for like a week before, community meeting about this card or something that is, you know. That gets that got more people than anything else.
Depending on the problem.
Instead of staying.
They don't fix themselves.
Sitting. Okay, so great. So let's say that our goal is to stop the trucks from just sitting.
I was actually reading this morning.
So the history of this, how long this has been a major road for industrial use for trucks?
Now, like, there's a whole generation that doesn't even know that. They don't know there's an alternative industrial process as a solution.
How long is the residential neighborhood?
So
So they see it as, capitalist society, it's just an outcome. It doesn't need to be that way. There's plenty of capitalist society.
Which is not that the city had those horrible things up.
That's another part of it.
But is this neighborhood growing or is it?
Changes how they changes have these days. They cycle.
Okay, so it's probably, there's probably.
Separated by, they already have.
Use the tool on the issue.
So you got some geographical barriers. Okay, and so with the trains there, does it, you said this is the only road in and out of industrial areas? Is it the only road in and out of neighborhoods as well, or just no?
I'm not sure how.
So the trucks can't get in. So the next piece was the fact
I
that
think you could use it on something like because you could really look into whether there are any barriers between conversations happening like city council doesn't talk to the mayor's office or whatever, where there's not a good dialogue between the city government and anything. And then you look at the technical aspects, a lot of communities struggle with this kind of thing is you just don't have data. Never ask those questions if they're dealing with situations they don't dealing with. So they don't have even the information to make decisions. And they also don't have expertise in guidelines or consultants. Then you have to bring to so I think there's a million ways in it to like, if we're able to get to a credible one, what has to go to philanthropic partnership, university partnership.
Sure. So it sounds to me, what I'm hearing you say is that right now, is there any organization between is there communication between the maybe building a bridge, the barges, and the trains? Do they communicate about who to do the truck and where on that?
They would need to band together or maybe
so here. So let's say that one of the things that's allowing this factor to exist is let's put down communication, right? So what I'm hearing you say is that ideally, if there was good communication, you wouldn't be bringing a train in until you knew it would go straight over the road. Right? You wouldn't bring it in, stop it, and then just wait. You get a communication.
Well, right, I mean, there's lots of like.
Well, I know, and just thinking regionally, I've heard from PPL, they're trying to do their, trying to work regionally in the Boston area, and Boston and Cambridge have really good data.
Even if they're moving, even when they're not stopped, it just takes a long time.
And they're trying to develop the same score to a barrier I cannot follow.
it's actually very.
So it could be rolled around this.
It's not like the data is identified. Actually, there's somewhere, but that's no data. I thought about it that way.
So like,
why is this the only road? Why is this the main road of the Chief? Is there any part of it common for these trucks? You said it's going to be about, why is there not? Okay, there's not a crossing, let's say it's all about, but by the way, times that you're just doing it, they're losing money.
Well, so one of the tasks is to talk about how the tools are.
So it's sort of like their driveway, like they're incorporated in this area.
I can think of a few things going on. One thing about the transportation tool that is great is the service to have big
Sure.
The connect piece, which is what's the purpose of it is
Decades and decades, all that. What about, what about the idea?
What it works off of the data
to me,
stuff
like
related to transport, modes of transport,
There's
economic data, we've had training who walks where the school is. The day where, if you have
they will say stop for it.
area of walking to
And the firework out there was taxed.
so they actually can use all that data to look at the existing application where there's a linkage between the bus, let's say it stops at a certain point, and if there's like what happens at that small amount of space between that.
So that would be my next question.
And then where can you make
If you have the length of the train,
not only
even moving slowly, there's a place in which you should be able to have another active crossing and then create a new. So it seems to me like the cheapest most effective way? What is it that is there like, there's a river, or is there something that prevents further down the rail taxis separated, further up, things like that? Is there something preventing us from creating another crossing with current? Maybe it exists, but it really, especially, they go down to where it's closest and go very distracting. It comes down physically as well as.
But I mean, it's so sure that the English speakers then kind of hear the Spanish conversation and drowning out the English one together.
The building, so one, I suspect, again, I don't know, it's on a map, but I would suspect there's probably another way that crosses the railroad tracks somewhere for it's probably just not anyone uses, because why would they turn across the railroad tracks a mile or two up when I can go down here and just run the railroad tracks?
Well, there was a stolen, could be that there were some issues regarding that, the wrong demographic, isn't that?
Okay, it's easy, I will say that it's easier to build roads than it is to move rail lines.
You know, there's just
moving railroad stations. The railroad, that level of the most flexible organizations that exist.
Maybe
Because they've been around since the history.
They may have enough with
the white people in this country.
to be
So, so they are inflexible and they will not move. So you have to find ways around them. And for a local jurisdiction file, building a new road, to be honest,
Did you choose that?
is expensive, but it's ownable. You can take that on and figure out a solution. It's a complex challenge. There's usually a way around it, and so something that's going to be on a bridge.
There's no great but they pay a lot of money. I'm kidding. Yeah, so that's a beautiful organization.
Sure, and that's why every time you get something that's immovable, and I'll tell you that your images are somewhere else, trying to find a way around, trying to find another access point up railroad. There's got to be, there is somewhere else that trucks they used to bring the question is to figure out where that may be the lowest, it may still be an expensive solution. I will also say, if the goal is to get these trains through faster, it sounds like a major thing. This communication thing is something that seems like that can be worked on. It's bureaucracy, but that feels like a manageable piece of bureaucracy. Because I will bet there is limited communication in our schedule. But it sounds like, I love scheduling. If you get somebody in there that can run an efficient schedule of like knowing exactly who launches a surprise. They run at a very specific rate.
Yeah, but then that's good, because that actually starts
have GPS.
Can't logistically or easily address it. And then there's, I think a lot of communities they've already have that relationship with our property tax going to help support the schools. And we're not paying a lot of property tax.
And institute that.
What other things can that community do to additional revenue? Self-tax. An initiative like
that is a fantastic idea. Looking at the, yes, train runs schedule. That is a good thing. And yes, the GPS and those trucks, they know exactly where they are and exactly what time they're also why.
Sometimes
absolutely. So when you go to the trucking company and say, I have a proposal that's going to save you money, right? Because those trucks sitting there, it's every minute. Oh, that's why the assistant driver is the main. The best. But it's, they need those trucks to like get in, drop their load, reload, and get out. They want that to happen, just how much money they need. So if I would have went to the truck manufacturer and said, we want to come up with a way in which we can cross-coordinate. So there's a lot of your trucks on. If we know train is going to be blocking during these hours of the day, or these minutes, from 3:15 to 3:45, we've got a train that's a mile long. We want to work with you to implement an alternate route or to time your trucks in their travels so that they're not arriving at these times, right? So that we're coordinating schedules for your inventory to move more efficiently. The byproduct is that we don't have all these emissions.
I mean, part of it is getting the individual voice, collective voice, that the power of the actors listen to it if you want to take the
They care about this, and they care about their
community has to listen to it. So that is a community organizing.
They have power to industrial.
If you want to, I mean, a nonprofit could be set up, which could be done without the city can't do it, but the better without the support of political entities.
So
you can still use
that feels to me like a startup. And when you go to when you approach the factory and say,
and then there's suggesting this and seeing all these things.
Tell me, what would a successful solution be for trucks? Literally being able to get in and out fast.
These are
how can we identify areas? I have trouble believing that there's if there is no internship, that's what I would that's what I would get
signed up
to find out
to learn more about bills and
to see if they have an interest in it.
About
guaranteed that they get some big numbers and they can figure if they shut a piece of equipment down and people went to work on that piece of equipment, they would lose extra. If they don't shut the equipment down, they defy OSHA regulations, they can run and take consequences on it, and they lose an arm or two dies. It was less expensive to keep a family off in a death place than it lost less money that way than shutting down their circulation. It's all that. And so I guarantee you that there's somebody that would run numbers and say, we can do that's $1 million and still have to run.
Understanding that there's
that's where a public-private
because these are not big budgets, right? And so that could be everything from local radio fundraising drives to company sponsor who donates a product and
so that seems like step number one. The other thing is if they say, let's just pretend, right? Every time you hit, I'm on the water side, so I'll just go around it. So if they say, yes, we love our trucks sitting there, future fuelers, they see to us. So the next thing is the emissions that we all I know right now, there are many, now there's a lot of regulations. However, I know that programs
don't necessarily like base
physical attachment, additional resources that put on them now can be to dramatically reduce these emissions. They cover some of the CO2, technical support. They actually make the trucks far more efficient. They're relatively expensive, but again, if you have a partnership with a health department or you have some sort of funding to like the residents, if you look at that health impact study and say we have this much money that we're spending every year annually on related risks and air quality, could we take a portion of that funding and partner with the company on their trucks? What are we willing to take to them and say, we want to partner with you and figure out a way to put this. It's a device. I know that it makes the truck wonderful, so much more efficient, and it's like
it's a process. I mean, this is literally yours and so it's better for you to get started.
And I know that she's done
a lot of work in school.
I was. Right, they have to see it. They may either they don't know that it exists, or there's some barrier to them doing it. Because I'll tell you, I'm fairly certain, like, this is not my area of expertise, but I'm fairly certain the technology.
So I know that it's been used for
This is not a new problem.
organizing around.
So that's something that's kind of Google was trying to And also what I found is that tech entrepreneurs that are creating these new solutions that aren't commercially available yet, they're always looking for places to
The other thing is that
to say like, hey, this tech startup is Seattle, and they got this Gizmo that they want to try. You partner with that are the ones that are the most digitally safe. They may be person else has to stand.
Who do you reach out to? And I think the question is just
And the other thing is, let's say that you do some Googling, one, I think that it already exists, so if we do some Googling and let's just pretend like it doesn't exist. I have partnered before with, they have these things that are tech, where they like have all these young people that come and like lock in for the night and they like come up with like genius ideas. Okay. They will take suggestions like there's a thing that needs to exist that doesn't, and they'll throw it out to 200 genius kids that will be locked in a room overnight to like work through problems. And like there are people that are like creating things that don't exist through these, like a 15-year-old, like I'm sure I built yours. Now we just need to get a prototype. So again, I think that there's ways to, there are various avenues to start get your partners and start prototyping a few different ways. Scheduling, alternate route, minimum used, if absolutely necessary, is there a desire to invest in an alternate route that doesn't exist, and then is there a technology in place that can help reduce these emissions?
So we take data from those tools.
Absolutely. All right, so as we wrap up and get ready for cocktails, maybe I'm the only one that gets excited about cocktails. Woo! All right. So as we wrap up, what I would love is for someone that feels really excited about what they've done today to tell me one time that you have released your inner activist, that you're like, I saw this thing and it just made me mad and I just let loose and I did something about it. And it could be anywhere, the grocery store. I was almost detained at the airport for getting upset about something. So, there's, like I said, things that upset me every day. Who has let their inner activist out? One time, anytime, about anything. Yeah, go ahead. Let's start here with Katie.
All right, well, I hope it's not a disappointment because it's not a big thing, but when you say whatever kind of gets you going. I live in Minnesota, and in the wintertime, I live near a university, so I got a lot of students coming into my neighborhood and parking. And by the time the spring comes and the snow starts to melt, I see all kinds of garbage that's been left behind by students. And I always hate March-ish when that starts to happen because I see it and I think, oh, I hate my neighborhood, the grass is and there's no leaves on the trees and all that garbage out there, and I just say, well, this is my weekend where I go out in my block and I pick up the garbage and I always feel better after, and I probably do that maybe 5 times a year because that's about the time that it needs it, but no other neighbor seems to do it, but it makes me feel better because I know I can't do the whole city, but I know I can do the area that I spend the most time in. So.
That's awesome! Yay! I mean, that is a perfect example of letting your inner activist out. That's fantastic. And I would encourage you. I bet there are other people that are annoyed. There are a lot of obsessive compulsive people that like to have tidy and clean, and I bet if you reached out to a few of your neighbors, I'm sure that you can find some people to help you with that. Christina?
Oh, I was just raising my hand.
Yeah.
I have a specific story in mind.
You've never done something that you were like, I'm so frustrated with this thing, I'm just gonna fix it.
Fix it?
Do something about it. Not fix it, but do something.
Oh, well, I live in DC, so I protest.
You name it, Black Lives Matter, no Muslim ban, Women's March. That's what I do. I get very passionate about a lot of social and political issues.
So protesting.
Protesting, yeah.
And that is, I hear a lot of people asking these days, what's the point of protesting? And I've done a lot of research trying to figure out, what is it that I felt during the Women's March in DC? What happened to me? Why did I feel like part of this bigger thing that humbled me in big ways? And the reason that people protest is to stand in solidarity, many times to say that we see this injustice, we see it collectively, and we are willing to stand arm in arm and let people know that we do recognize this is a problem. And that we're willing to take charge and go home and do things. And so I will say, one of the things for me is a little thing. I live in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. It's a red city in a red county in a red state.
And so, you know, there's a lot of, with the Muslim ban, I chose to find a woman from one of the banned nations to like go to get my hair done, right? I had to have my hair cut anyway. I wanted to support a woman-owned business. And so I went and spent my $65 with a woman who has a lot of fear and anxiety, and I just wanted her to know, like, I'm with you, sister. Like, I want to invest in your business and do for you, and that's like a little thing, but it matters. What about you? You've been sitting over here quiet, and I know you're just like, oh, I'm just here to help.
Inner activist.
When I was an undergrad in Indiana, for all like the home football games, all the students would always like do all the tailgating and nonsense and throw beer cans everywhere. And that part didn't frustrate me, but what frustrated me was there was no recycling. And so one day I just showed up with recycling bags and then started the recycling program at the tailgates, and I think it's still going on, hopefully.
Fantastic, nice. See, one person makes a huge difference. I want, generationally, I just want to make sure that we have equity here. And I would like I want to make sure that we have equity of distribution. You know where it's going? One of the things that I was the most excited about was when I ran through this presentation with my dad, who is this fantastic, like raised me in his old hippie, you know, the government's out to get you kind of. He was like, I don't want to bother you with my medicines because I know that you're trying to overthrow the government and I know you're pretty busy. And I'm like, that's not what's happening here, Dad. So when I did this presentation for him, he said, you know, I was just thinking, and I've never thought of myself as an activist, and I've done stuff that's activist-like. And I was like, Dad, you protest the war in Vietnam, like weren't you arrested in DC? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, I think that qualifies as something. So I think generationally there are different things at different times that speak to us, right? I think that marching is something that traditionally we think, that's for, like my dad said, I don't have the energy for that anymore. Like I devote my time to activism in a way that I can manage not out in the streets for 8 hours. So does anyone else have a moment where they let their inner activist fly that they would like to share? Wayne?
I could.
Do it.
Semi-retired in education, but I decided education is really one of my core values beyond any doubt. And so I still teach a couple courses, and students who drop out or stop out, I go after them in a supporting way. I want them to know I'm on their side, and I do anything I can to get them back into the classroom. And so I pick my battles today very carefully.
Right on, that's a resistance, all right, lady.
So what I'm going to send you off to cocktail hour with is this. Be the change you want to see, right? We hear that all the time, but I want you to say with me, I am an activist. Say it. I am an activist. Say it again. I am an activist. Yes, I am an activist. And be proud, wear it with pride. And what I would like for you to do is go home when you're done with the conference, and I want you to recruit another person to see themselves as an activist. Grow the mentality that you can figure out how to change it, right? Whether it's dealing with pollution caused by trains stopped, or it's, you know, recycling, or it's injustice in a neighborhood with people's voices not being heard, whatever it is. Say it one more time with me. I am an activist. Yes, you are. So you are, take your worksheets with you. Priska and I have cards up here. We have Dr. Akam's contact information. You have tools and resources available to you. We know of many more tools and resources, and it feels like 2 hours is a really long time, but we know of lots of them, and we want to help you find a path forward for whatever is frustrating you, and feel like you can reach out to us, because we would love to collaborate, as would Dr. Akam. So go forth, find the resistance, be the activist.
Or find us at the reception.
Yeah, we'll be the ones with the cocktails. All right, that's it. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Yes, it must be free time as well as you can free one if you want.
Well, what's so funny is my husband's
And-
Mom is 87, and she's been
Yeah, we're trying to figure out.
Yeah,